Good afternoon. Welcome to our interview today with Dani from Dun and Dusted. Really looking forward to this today. Marvelous business, not just in Northern Ireland, but right across the world. So many exciting stories, I believe, that she's got to tell us. And just like to welcome Dani to our call today. So thank you for joining us, Dani.
Thank you, Andrew. I am really excited to talk about branding, my favorite topic.
Well, branding, how would you describe, before we get into any of this, how would you describe branding for the person who hasn't a clue?
That's a really good question, actually, because I think there's a bit of a difference between graphic design and brand design. And branding is really how you make your customer feel. Graphic design is how you implement those ideas of that vision that you have for your company. It's the conversation about you when you're not in the room. It's what your customers think and feel about that experience. So you can have all the best intentions of the world, of looking great, but if you're not really communicating with passion about your values as a brand and how that's brought out through all your collateral, kind of miss it a little bit. But it's exciting to watch at the minute whenever we haven't been able to get out and about, and all the kind of interaction that we used to enjoy is now gone online. And you'll see that brands are taking up a very different space and a very different personality now. They've almost been forced to speak to their customers much more closely than they ever have. So it's really interesting.
So, what would you say, keeping with the branding idea, what would you say is one of the strongest brands in the world? First of all, what would you say is a strong brand for you?
Well, being a designer, I guess everybody expects you to say Apple. I think what's really interesting in terms of branding, if you look at Tesla and you look at Elon Musk, and that's a very powerful example of where when you start a company, your personal brand has a huge link to the company that you have. And we can see that, his mindset and how he is as a person. He's very charismatic. He's making a lot of business decisions and talking to customers one to one, on the likes of Twitter. But we can see how that has an effect on what he's doing. So we have the Tesla, but then we also see what he's doing, with the space initiatives. And I think it's a really good example of just the power of what a brand can actually do. So not only is he creating a company, he's wanting to inspire people to want more, to challenge more, to what can we do as a society. So it's quite an exciting one to watch. And then if you look at Apple, there's a brand that has been around for a long, long time, focused on innovation, focused on technology, but bridging the gap between technology and ease of use. So they do a huge amount of work on R&D for that user experience, UX, UI. So they're a great company to watch for future developments.
So, what you're telling me is a brand's just not a logo.
Yeah.
Sure. It's always interesting because you get a lot of people who first thing they start off, I need a logo, I need this, but they never think of all the other aspects of branding, which then leads into the marketing and all the rest of it, which is interesting. But just coming back from business just for a moment, tell us a wee bit about you, the person, not you, the business person, but you in a personal way. Your childhood, how you then went through school, where was your interest, that type of thing.
Like a therapy session right here. So I grew up in Glengormley, and I had a great sort of upbringing in a dance environment. I'm actually sort of an ex-dancer. I was on the Northern Ireland National Dance Fitness team, and actually last night we were performing again, which was just brilliant. It's just really, really good group of girls there, and having that sort of upbringing where you're very much of that team environment, it's really, really good for developing that just like personal skills that you don't see. I suppose it's like, if you're a young guy or a young girl and you're playing sport, it's just so good to kind of get that sort of grounding and that passion. So fitness has always been in my background. My mum danced, me and my sister danced. And my mum and dad still dance at every golf club do. They're the first people on the floor. So definitely health and fitness has been in our family from the get-go. And also design. Like my dad is very good craftsman. And he would sort of inspire you to make all these things in the garage growing up. So right from the start, I was very interested in product design. And I went to uni up in Derry and I did a mixture of product, graphic and directive design. and went on from there to, have this career. But very much, that balance, I think, has really stayed with me from a young age, that you need to be able to, get out there and see the world and do and have your career, but also be mindful of your health. And like coming from such a small place, like we laugh, like you and I have been on different business talks, and I just say, I'm Dani from the docks, literally going across to the States, going to Dubai, being all around the world. I think that comes from building that sort of sense of community spirit and that sense of you're supported. And I talk about, that a lot with my clients. It's about, having the team of people around you that really get behind you and support you. Starting a business, it's tricky, it's not for everybody. So having those people around you, that team, if you will, so I grew up with that support of a dance team. And when you bring that into business, it's very much, who's around you, who's supporting you, who's got that, so that they see your drive and they're like, of course you can do it, right? Let's keep going. And it's so important because you're going to get days where it is tough, but you need to have that group of people with you. And then the other side of things would be my, I love getting on the water. As you know, I've talked before about my supboarding. I love this. I know it's a huge craze that everybody's like joined on now. I can happily say it was before COVID that I got on board, so to speak. And I just love it. It's it's a great group of people. There's a fantastic Facebook group set up a friend of mine, Alan, and I think it's Sup NI. And you just join in and just come along to some of the sub events. And it's just great, great, again, a great community.
You've been spending a bit of time up the North Coast, so is that one of the reasons?
Yep. Anything just to get in the water. I mean, one thing that I can say about, Ireland, we have some of the most beautiful scenic places on earth, and being able to get out on the water very easily. You don't have to, get a boat or anything like that. But to see Ireland from the sea is, again, just a beautiful experience.
Yeah, very good. Well, when you're talking about going to college and you talk about your father's interest in craft and design and making things, and then you went to university, really, and that's where you wanted to learn more about product and things like that, where you're more in the branding thing now. Yeah. Was there a massive impact on you in that whole product design side at first? Where was that taking you to, or type of thing?
I have always been fascinated about storytelling and about how we communicate as a society and as an expression of culture. How do we tell story? How do we relay information? And my grandfather started this. He would have taught us on a Sunday. We used to always have him around to the house, and he would be telling these wild adventures, and it just really. It always filled me and my sister just full of this sense of awe, where you could travel. And I think with the product side, with my dad going to uni up in Derry, I thought, right, product design, that's where it's at. This is what I want to do. And when I got up there and I was in it, I really enjoyed it. But the big thing for me was I worked for Lecky's, which do support furniture for children with cerebral palsy back in the day, and they've progressed massively now. A wonderful company. And after doing a work segment there, I realized that I really wanted to get into work. I wanted to get the experience of working either with a company or doing some freelance work, whatever that was. So I'd approached my lecturers to see if I could get out for a year. And that wasn't a thing that was done in that particular that course. But we decided that there was an opportunity to go to America and to get over there to some universities, create a scheme. Nobody had done it before, but of course, me being me, I was like, okay, let's just do it. Let's get it done. And I went across, and that changed my whole perception of communication. So my interest in the communication of a product started to change of how do you create this message of how the product helps that person's life. And branding started to come into this, and it's this visual language that we have that we communicate those services, the products. So it's not just the product, but why this is the benefit. How do we differentiate? If there's 5 different products, how do we know which one's the best? How do these products make us feel? So being over at Savannah College of Art and Design, which is arguably the best art school in all of America, I was around some of the most talented people you would ever meet. And, George Lucas from ILM, he hires directly from there. And there's a reason. The creativity is buzzing, it's thriving, and you're around these people who are literally, they're thinking on a global level, even at, you know, university times. And you start to understand that, you know, as you progress and look through the idea of design communication, branding is this nugget that sort of underpins so much. And that started when I came back from there. I was just on a different course. So that one section just that changed my life.
The you also had a famous politician that helped you as well, I believe. So you might tell us a wee bit about that and how that really helped drive.
Yeah, you because we've written into the book that we brought out, and I was asked to write a chapter of a connection that really changed your direction or changed your life. And I was very fortunate that my lecturers at the time had known John Hume, and he wrote a letter of recommendation for me to go across to America. Literally, Dani from the docks going across to, you know, the big smoke. And I am so incredibly grateful that I received something of that magnitude even back then, and to know that, you know, in his passing and his legacy, you know, it's great to have that letter of just getting me across, having that sort of that champion, so to speak, you know, being behind you. You started to believe in yourself a little bit more. Yes, I can do this. And you're going across. Again, back then it was like, this is America. This is huge. You know, I think I'd been on several holidays, but I'd never thought about living in the States or spending any significant time there. It was monumental significance to get me across.
I think it's always amazing that people sometimes who we look at, whether it's a politician or a business person or whatever it might be, we often think they're far away and they mightn't be able to help, but they're always willing to help. I think that's a big thing as well, though.
Well, if you think you can tweet the president of the United States right now, today, you know, that was different back then. You know, I'm not that old, but you know, you can't. You know, that's the thing. You know, even having that letter, that was huge. You know, and it just then allowed then the American universities to see the significance of this and really get you know, him just even saying this is a great initiative. Let's go for it. You know, that opened doors that I could never open.
What you're telling me is you still remember dial-up internet. That's what you're telling me.
The modem number.
Very good. Well, taking that the whole design thing and where you ended up with that and the branding and that going through university. So, where was your first job, or where did you go from the university side? What happened to you then?
I'm a big believer in you make your life happen. You know, you make your life happen for what you want. So I'd seen an opportunity to go and work for LG Electronics. So I took myself to Dublin. My mum and dad still talk about this. I'd been to the interview and got the job, and I just packed the bag and I was going to Dublin. And my mum had said, we were driving you down to Dublin and you just had everything sorted in your head. You had 3 properties to look at, had to make a decision, and then moved in. So I've very much been a proactive kind of person, but I just knew I'm going to do this. It's going to happen. That sort of, I don't know, maybe it's self-belief, maybe it's just, you know, young naivety, but it worked. And it's about making those connections, putting yourself in that position where you do go out and you meet these people, and then that builds then of where that then leads you. So that was before actually I went to America, and when I came back, I was just working on a completely different level. It was just a different energy. I went out more in my final year in university than I did in all of the previous years because I was in flow. I knew what I wanted. I knew where I was going. So I came out of uni. My first job was in Walker Communications in Hollywood. And then very famously, then I became a disciple of Triplicate, which is arguably Ireland's best, you know, design studio at the time. Was there 8 years, you know, so it's there's a lot of companies in Northern Ireland now, a lot of design studios, and nearly every one of them has served their time in Triplicate, and that's a testament to Ian and Catherine and Ellen who set that up.
And at what point then, because that's part of that youth side, that unstoppable thing that nothing's going to stop me to do it. Where did that come from? You know, there must have been.
I have no idea.
Well, sometimes you just see things, you know, and also I think sometimes you you've never been pushed back as much, and nothing seems impossible. So you drive forward with that.
I don't know. My parents were always very much, there's no such thing as a stupid question.
Yeah.
Always never be afraid to ask the question, because if you ask it, you guarantee there's 3 or 4 other people, and I think like my mum and dad were that generation. I'm sure you've seen the film Belfast. In that film, they show the ticket to go to Australia.
I actually haven't seen the film yet. I haven't.
Well, my mum and dad actually, they took that ticket. They left. They got married on a Tuesday, and on the Friday they emigrated to Australia on that £10 ticket. So I think there's something in my family, perhaps, that we like adventure. We sort of beat to the sound of our own drum. And they took themselves off. I'm the same. I travel as well. I was traveling as much as I could, most years. So there is that kind of, that spirit that we have.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Where did the changeover come from an employee to becoming self-employed? Where did that, and how did that come about? And
well, I was approached at that time when I was senior designer at Triplicate. I was approached by Alan Overy, who are the 5th largest law firm in the world, and I was asked would I like to go for an interview and to be design manager, and very fortunately I got that position. And that took me to work in London and in Belfast, managing staff in both those locations. And what started to happen was I was making so many connections in London. It just seemed to be like a no-brainer. I was being asked to do extra work, I guess, like freelance almost. And I'd served my time so much in Triplicate and absolutely loved it. But Triplicate does teach you how to almost be your own design studio. You're going out, you're meeting clients, you're writing the brief, you're doing the work, you're artworking it, and you're invoicing. So that was already in me. And then meeting the clients in London, I was meeting people who I would never have been in contact with. Some of my first ever clients were the Saudi royal family. And actually did a work with Kate Middleton's company as well. So, these were doors, again, that were opening because I was putting myself in the position to be out there and to be visible. And it just then was a natural sort of conclusion, like, okay, so where do I then want to go? Where do I want to be right now? And coming back, to Belfast, back and forth from London, it just felt like a natural kind of way to go forward. It was like, well, if I'm doing this for other people, why wouldn't I set this up for myself and do this the way I feel the change needed to be, which was do London level work without the London level HQ price tag.
Yeah, no, very good. Well, whenever you talk about doing that, what would you say has been you talked about storytelling earlier. So what would be your greatest story of a client that you've worked with, you've helped them, and the outcome that actually came out of all that? Is there one that springs to your mind of someone that really was?
Many. There's so many. One recently actually was the Tefl Academy, and I've worked with them for about 6-7 years, and they're just the most delightful people. So when I worked with them 6 years ago, when I started with them, they had a very unusual brand, and they'd asked me to do a small bit of work, and I said, guys, we really should do a rebrand. And they're like, yeah, well, we'll maybe do this, maybe do that. And I said, okay, well, so I looked at their communication. A lot of the times, this is what I mean about branding. It's not about graphics. It's about how you communicate your service and what makes you different. That set of value. And I worked through, a couple of different brochures, then redid their website. And just recently, I said, look, guys, now's the time to rebrand. And we just did this huge piece of work there. Launched it just before lockdown, and they went to have their 2 best years ever. We repurposed a lot of the work that they would have done. It's, teaching English as a foreign language, so a lot of it would have been in person. We reformatted all of that to online because there was more people then at home worried about their future, worried about university, and they thought, okay, well, if I actually learn and get this certificate, then I can actually go and work. I can work from here. Once the travel opens up, then I can go to these other places. And it was just that really focusing on their values and taking action to match those values, and being a part of that rebrand was just fantastic. Seeing them go to such mega success was just amazing. And the videos that we produced, everything just lit up. And again, when it's really lovely work like that and you're working with really great people, it's just an absolute joy.
You're talking about types of clients you're dealing with. I know we had a conversation recently about getting new clients and what type of thing, where you can look for new clients and looking at the network you already have and all that. Would you like to maybe share some of the things that you've done recently just to get new clients, which might be useful for other people even listening in?
Yeah, and I think when you move into self-employment, there's a misconception, I think, at times where people think that it either can be a struggle or where am I going to get this work or how's that? And I always feel like when you over deliver on a project, when you think of your last piece of work is going to be, that's the best that, it has to be the best that you can show. And you're confident with that you've really, really delivered. I would say naturally people refer and they enjoy that whole brand experience that is you. But there are definitely going to be times when you do need to be a little bit more proactive and go out looking. And that can be like, we've talked about, it could have been through COVID, it could have been, anytime. And it's always worthwhile, keeping that presence, visible, but also then communicating to those clients that you've worked with, who you've really enjoyed that relationship with, and seeing, just even getting feedback, or maybe you're looking for a testimonial. But it can be also, when I've talked about this just the other day, reaching out to those clients who have the same value system that you've really enjoyed working with because you're very aligned, and then going back to them and saying, we've really enjoyed this relationship. Can you think of anybody, whether it's another colleague of yours or if it's another business that you're connected to, that might also enjoy this relationship and working? So it's, I suppose, asking for a referral without asking for a referral. You're trying to bring to you like-minded clients based on the client that you've had a brilliant success with. And I think that's a really nice way of easing into that, because you know that it's worked really well with you guys. So all you're really saying is there anybody else like you that you might know? Because the chances are, if you're great, then your friends or your other colleagues or your other business friends or in your business community, it could be LinkedIn, it could be Facebook. And a lot of the time then we had emails come back and say, Dani, do you know what? I was just talking about you and your company the other day. Yes, I have somebody in mind. And it's just about that naturally easing into the conversation as opposed to a very dry, can I get a referral, or, or something like that.
It's always interesting. I was reading a book recently where the person was saying you should never ask for a referral. What they were saying was you plant seeds and they turn into referrals. And I think that whole idea of saying, I'm open for business and I'm looking to speak to other people similar is a fantastic way of putting it. One of the things that interests me, your company name is Done and Dusted. So tell us a wee bit about how that came about. How did that come about, and why have you stuck with it, type of thing?
So Done and Dusted, for anybody who's watching this who's not from Belfast, it's very much a saying that that we would say here, that when something is done and sorted and mentally, it's just complete, and there's a peace of mind. It's also something that my dad used to say all the time, and whenever I was growing up and I, would hear my dad say this, oh, that's done and dusted, that. And it was like a checklist whenever he was out, in the garage and making these pieces of furniture or whatever. And it kind of stuck with me. Also with my name, Danielle, there's the alliteration of the D. And then when you're saying your email, Dani at doneanddusteddesign.com, it's, again, no one ever forgets it. So it's a nice kind of sort of marketing technique a little bit. But when I started the company, what I wanted to make sure was this idea of, when you work with us, it's just easy. I didn't want stress or drama or any kind of unnecessary overheads or unnecessary fees. When we do a quotation to a client, it's like a menu. And so you pick and choose whatever you want. You get an invoice of 50% upfront, and we will only ever invoice at the very end of that job and when you're happy. And when you work with that mindset, to me, was a natural way to call it, done and dusted, because, and what you find is the client says that, oh, that's that done and dusted, that's great. But my dad in full, the way my dad is, said, well, that's okay. As you're starting out, but if it doesn't work, you could always move it into a cleaning company. Thanks, Dad. Thanks for that vote of confidence there.
Very good. Well, it's an excellent name, and I do get the whole idea behind it, which is fantastic. So what's for Done and Dusted now? What's your goals for Dun Dusted for the next year, 2 years? Where do you want to take it to? Because I know you've been all around the world as well, but you haven't really touched on that. You've been in Dubai. You've got on your website, you've got a Dubai office, you've got a New York office. So tell me about where you want to take your business to.
Yeah, I remember, and it is a thing whenever you're self-employed, sometimes, you can grow very quickly. And it was one of my business colleagues at the time and said, where are you at right now? And this is about our second or third year in. And I said, well, we're doing really well. A lot of my contact, because I've lived in the States, we had a lot of contacts there and in London. And I guess I kind of wanted to see where would be the Goldilocks place, to have the HQ. And also, I at that time, I did feel the desire to move away from Northern Ireland. So I opened up an office in New York. And it was fantastic. It was brilliant. We really enjoyed it. The guys that moved from New York now out to from Central New York out to Brooklyn. And then I came back and I thought, because we were still having clients from the UAE, I thought, well, what about Dubai? Maybe that's it. So I went out there and again opened up a small satellite office. They have then moved since to New Zealand. So it's again trying to find that zone. But what we found was actually being in the UK was a nice way. When you're working in the morning, you've got, the UAE clients, then you move as you go through the day, mostly UK, and then America comes on in the evening. And it's a nice flow, because if you're doing work, you can process that then during the day, and then it's, it's almost like turned around within 24 hours, depending on where your client is. So that worked really well. At present, that's kind of still working for us. It's nothing has really changed. When COVID hit, we were already working like this, so there wasn't a great deal of difference, for us. So where we're looking at now is we've found a lot of our clients have moved online, and we do UX UI, and I'm seeing a big push for more of this. So we're now moving into that a little bit more strategic, whereas it was maybe before solely graphics, and moving into like web development and apps. We do a lot of apps, but we're seeing a lot of clients are struggling with UX and UI, and it's a service that we do, and that sort of strategy behind it. And the system architecture, bits and pieces like that. So that's where we're moving at the minute. I can't see us really needing to, have another presence anywhere else, because we've kind of got the time zones nailed down. And that was just suck it and see. It was, what works, what doesn't, trial and error. There was no sort of map of what to do. It was just, let's just see if this works.
It's been interesting over the last while, especially with COVID. All of a sudden, people are more agreeable to Zoom and to online meetings and things like that, and getting the world's become so much smaller. That's definitely the case. All those things. So just one of the things you've been involved in, I want to just maybe finish with this around it. You've been involved in the Belfast Coffee Company, and I know I've drank the coffee, I've got the yellow mug and all the rest of it. So for me, I think it's quite a strong brand that stands out in that sense, a logo brand that stands out. But I also like the story attached to it, and I think that made a massive impact on me. So you're buying into not just a coffee, but a story around coffee. So tell me a bit about how you came about that, how that brand developed for you, and maybe there's some things in there, some tips that you could give us for the small business owner today, because many times the small business owners are just running and not really thinking about how they can be better, maybe.
I think it's worthwhile. This was in the height of lockdown. This was in the middle of, it does sort of take me back a little bit that, I started 2 other companies in the middle of lockdown whilst running a design company. And I think that's that entrepreneurial spirit. Being self-employed, being an entrepreneur is not for everybody. You do have to have a certain amount of drive. You have to have that kind of everything is an opportunity mindset. And with that, you can make anything happen. We'd sat about 4 friends, and we just thought, wouldn't it be great to have your own coffee? And we talked a lot about this, and as it sort of transpired, one of the guys, Eddie, he was talking about the Titanic, and he says, my family actually have a recipe that we brewed the coffee. I was like, oh my God, didn't know that. And we started to then look at, there was an amazing guy in the Belfast Roasters who I know well, Alan Cox, and we brought this recipe and said, like, Alan, is there a way of replicating this? Is there a way of like really bringing this, to a modern palate? And we replicated it, and we didn't start out as massive coffee connoisseurs, but we created a coffee that we were really behind and really, really liked. And we did some taste testing and had some great feedback. The aroma is, I'm sure you would agree, Andrew, the aroma is just amazing. It just smells so, so good. So then it came down to me to do the packaging. And when you have a product that is ubiquitous as coffee, it is so important that you think about your brand, the values, then the actions you take based on the values. So we did a bit of a kind of a experiment at the start, and I kind of needed to illustrate the difference. So you can do a coffee that is very trendy and something that's kind of hipster, or you can do something that's more traditional. We needed to understand our market. We wanted to look at tourism. We wanted to be that coffee brand that is the gift experience of Belfast. So that's not the kind of trendy coffee in a can. There's a marketplace for that, and it's fantastic. We needed to really, hunker down on what that is. So the typography that is done, it's done from a very traditional print technique that was done in the 18 and 1900s. All of that calligraphy, everything that we put in, owning the color where possible. When you do packaging, you want to really think about, is there a color scheme that can really shout out from the shelf? So, when you're doing packaging, it's not just a 2D experience, it's a 3D experience. And you have to think about where that sits on the shelf and owning that space. But also, does it actually say coffee? Customers come in sometimes to a retail experience and they don't necessarily know what they're looking for, or they maybe pick something up and go, oh, that looks nice, I'll take that home. So it's really important to communicate what you're actually selling on your product. There was a crisp company actually that came out from here, and they put the logo at the very bottom, but they didn't think about how do you stack the shelf. As soon as the crisps went into the shelf, the brand was completely hidden. You always need to think about, when you do packaging, you need to think about it being, they call it the superhero. So if you imagine that sort of superhero chest shape, your brand should really occupy that space. And then in and around that area, that's where you want to think about your messaging of what is it, what is your product descriptor, and then get that up to the fore and look at owning a color combination if you can. So we got the packaging nailed. Then we were in the height of lockdown, so we had to wait, I don't know how long it was, till we got any samples back. And you're just hoping that this looks well. You've done everything online, whereas before you might have had, personal conversations and got samples and, drove over, checked the print. You couldn't do any of that. So we, with a hope and a prayer, we got the samples back and they just looked great. So then we had to set up then that, the packaging, how that went through, filling the bags and starting to get the presents out there. One of the things that was really important to us was to tell the story of Belfast, not the negative, what we've gone through, atrocities, but to show we are, as a city, have really been really instrumental in a lot of the arts here. So we have a huge film industry. We have fantastic musicians and street artists. And we thought, why don't we help each other all out? Why don't we start to profile artists? Why don't we gift some of the experiences? I was down on the set of Line of Duty season 6 with like this gift for Vicky McClure, and she then tweeted it. So we things like that. She's like, oh, thank you, Belfast Coffee, that's brilliant. Seeing Adrian Dunbar and having a wee sort of chat with Martin, all those things that you're communicating the brand as we're passionate about. Thank you for filming in Belfast. That's really good. Not only does it promote us, but it promotes them as well. So we got local street artists involved. We spoke to different film stars, and again, just getting that brand out there. And it's just really built that up slowly with all of our values in place. So we weren't trying to run. It was just, let's just get it right, get the product right, so it tastes great, get the packaging right, look at your social media, engage. It's better to have low numbers at the right customer as opposed to just get everybody on. But we started to look at competitions that would encourage people to share the stories and to like the Instagram and Facebook, and it just really built from there. I chatted to a couple of the BBC journalists, and they were really interested to see just the product development, and I was on then with Dougal Shaw on the BBC. So we things like that, just building it up slowly after time. and just going out, you go and really the extra mile and delivery. If somebody didn't get, because Royal Mail at that point, there was the whole Brexit side of things that was coming into it as well. So it got to the stage where we were literally driving around the country to drop off packages to make sure that people got this, and that was important for us to deliver when we said we could.
I think it's very interesting, though, some of the things you've brought across there, and you think of this from a small business owner in a sense of what you were just talking about, where you've started up a brand new company really with that and the brand importance of it. Because the first big thing that's out of that was whenever you start that brand, you're really starting to know who is our customer, who's our market that we're going after. And many times, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are that scattergun approach and trying to be all things to all people. But really what you're saying is, no, you can't really do that in that brand and who you're delivering to.
It's not about what you like. I mean,
Yeah.
whether you like the color purple, it's irrelevant. If your customer, if that's not sitting with them, then you don't pick anything that doesn't reverberate with that customer experience. So it really is, you need to take yourself out of the equation. It's just about your customer, and keep focusing on that and really dive into that demographic, understand where does this person live, what newspapers do they read, what do they watch online, are they on Netflix, are they on Pinterest, what are they used to seeing? If it's a tourism product, okay, so they're coming to Belfast, what do they want to bring back? What is memorable? All of those type of things you have to build in. So it's not necessarily, you don't have to like what you're doing or what it looks like. I mean, it helps if you do, but that's great. But definitely get yourself out of the equation for sure.
I was always surprised. I mean, I was involved for a short time within promotional clothing. But again, whenever you're doing that, people getting their logos on garments and things like that, or on gifts or whatever it was, which I never really realized until I got involved in that every color really has a meaning around it or a feeling, or it buys into a certain thing. I remember spending a day with a guy who was an expert in typeface, using the right typeface and things like that for certain things. And I was just amazed at how, and again, he took us through simple processes from mood boards and things just to get people thinking. Very interesting. And I think it's very powerful that you actually connect with people on that emotional level as well, through the
one of the questions that I ask clients whenever I'm working with them, and it always goes down really well with male clients. If you were a car, what car would you be? And that's very similar to thinking about typography. Each type has a personality, and much like whenever I ask that question, and we're talking about, say they're launching a new brand, and it sort of throws them a bit. It's like, what do you mean? I said, well, we can have a Volvo and we can have a very safe personality, or are you a Tesla, a wee bit of flair, are you a bit nippy, are you a Mini Cooper? And then they start to understand that's brand personality. And a lot of times whenever you talk about brand, maybe people don't really get what it is, but when you ask them, okay, would this company, what would that car be that epitomized that company? It's a good way of getting them to think, oh right, okay, yes, I'm an Audi, really focused on technology, really focused on design and that nitty gritty. Or are you more flamboyant? Or, is it a Lamborghini? Is it, a Mustang? What is that? And that, I think, helps clients understand that's the brand personality. And that's such a difference, of what it can be.
Yeah. It's amazing stuff. So it really is. And I really enjoyed talking with you today. We originally talked about doing 30 minutes. You realise that we're nearly 40 minutes. And I
could believe it. I could believe it.
We're only scratching the surface, and that's one of the things. So some of the things we looked at there very briefly, we talked about the small business owner again. One of the tips really was making sure you really know your client base, know your client well. In that sense. Is there anything else from a branding point of view that you would give someone advice on? Just very quickly, is there one or two things that they should look at? How important is it? How do they engage in that sense? Is it important to some people or not? What would you suggest?
I always think it's a good place when you're starting out to don't be afraid to go on the IPO website and to check if there's another company with that name in that industry or in that sector. I think a lot of times clients can get a name in their head and actually it's taken by somebody else and they maybe haven't even Googled it. The internet is your friend. Do your research. You know, if something seems really too good to be true, ask yourself why that might be. And it could be that another company's bought that domain or it's bought the name. So just do it. If you go onto ipo.gov, you can search by registered mark or words. And that's a very good place just to check where you are legally. It's a conversation that we don't really talk about very much, especially in Ireland, but you should really be owning all of that IP whenever you start a company so that there's no infringement. And I've dealt with that quite recently. I suppose in lockdown, there's a lot of people, you know, starting new businesses, but even just launching websites, you know, they want to advertise their service or whatever, and they maybe haven't checked that there could be quite a big company, you know, and they have a bigger wallet, you know, so they can easily take you to court, and you don't want to go down that rabbit hole.
It's very interesting to say that because one of my friends has got a particular product and they're launching it throughout the world. And in one particular country, they went after the uh, trademark, whatever it was, and someone had things similar. And one of those companies has actually put in an objection to them using that brand in that country, and that's cost them a lot of money. Now it's different, two different types of products, all the rest of it, but the one company has objected it's going to cost them more money just to be able to get that brand in that particular country, which is great advice. I think one of the issues is we grew up in a small country. We never think of a bigger country and what it might lead to, and that's another particular issue. If there's one last thing you could say to the business owner about branding, what would it be? What's the last thing you'd like to give somebody a piece of advice or whatever?
Well, I'd say it would be probably mindset. There's always going to be struggles, but if you've got a good team with you, if you surround yourself with people who are not energy drainers, they are people who believe and see your vision. That is your biggest ally. There's going to be good days. There's going to be a lot of great days. There might be 1 or 2 days where you need a little bit of advice. You need those people around you who go, do you know what? You've got this. Keep going. And that can be anything. It can be, you know, maybe you're having issues with finance. Maybe you're round in circles with your designer and trying to figure out what typeface it is. You need that circle of light. You know, you need that circle around you who really understand what it means to be self-employed, and understand the nuances that come with, you know, owning a company. And so that team is so integral, I would say. So that mindset of just being able to have, you know, those people around you, I think is key, you know, for companies rather than just, you know, specifically branding, because it falls under that, you know, anyway.
Very good, excellent. It's a fantastic piece of advice, Brian. Again, I think it was Jim Rohn who said, "You become like the five people that you spend time with." So it's always important to the right people around you to support you. Uh, Today, I would really like to thank Dani for coming and being online with us today, live on Facebook and also on LinkedIn. It's appreciated. I hope that you have learned something from today and benefit from something from today. Again, I'm quite sure, Dani, you can be. How can people get in touch with you if they want to speak to you further? Is it LinkedIn? Is it email? Is it telephone? What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Most likely LinkedIn, drop me a line, or you can send an email to Dani at Done and Dusted Design, or speak on Facebook or Instagram. We're all over that.
There you are. You're on all the channels. So thank you very much for being with us today, Dani. Thank you for those who have listened in. We see a number of people there on the LinkedIn as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And thank you very much. And I know I benefit from today. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew.